Hey y'all, this is Greg Crawford, and I want to tell you about this exciting and powerful new moon in Capricorn on December 30th. Now, because this is a new moon that is lining up with a new year, we would normally find this to be extra important because we have a sync between a lunar cycle ending and beginning and a calendar year ending and beginning. And so we have a natural flow of being able to think about the past year coming to the end and setting intentions not only for this next lunar cycle, but setting intentions for the whole year that is coming. But because the year 2025 signifies such immense change and a real unpredictable element of change and new creative directions and places you may go with your life that you're not even completely aware of at this time, we really have a strong sense of being at a threshold with this Capricorn new moon. And so it's interesting that it is timing the end of one year and the beginning of another. It's also set in the middle of the two eclipse seasons because the new moon in Capricorn is forming a square aspect with the lunar nodes. And so these new moons that come in between eclipses also normally have this underlying sense of being a bit at a crossroads and at this stage of a transition. Now, this feeling of being at a threshold is really important to take in fully because there is a sense of unknowing, the sense of liminality that we are feeling. And with that, it's natural for fears to come up, to have some apprehension about the future, to have a sense of uncertainty about what might be going on. And that is going to be really important to confront and look at about yourself. And there are, in fact, some astrological aspects involved in this Capricorn new moon that will be bringing these issues up for you to face. And that's going to be really important to do because the most important thing about this year, because so much will be changing, so many big world events will be unfolding that will be out of our control, we are going to have to flow with and embrace the changes that are coming, but we also want to set intentions and take command of the parts of our life that we do have agency over. And it'll be more important than ever to really be using that moral compass of your own integrity and your own values and being part of the change that you want to create and see manifest in the world around you this year. And so let's take a look at this Capricorn new moon to get a little bit more into the details of how that's all playing out. Now, there are several factors involved in making this Capricorn new moon very potent, but the first one I want to draw our attention to is the applying harmonious sextile aspect between the Capricorn new moon with Saturn in Pisces. This is very important because the new moon is in the earthy home of Saturn. And so the moon being received by the Lord of the lunation in this harmonious aspect is going to be very helpful for coming to terms with the circumstances of our life and realizing the changes that we want to put into effect with this new moon. It makes me think a lot about that penetrating vision of the goatfish being available that can help us gaze into the underlying fabric of reality to discern what can we build upon a sturdy foundation and really develop in the year ahead versus what we need to be letting go of. Because we are talking about a moon in the sign of Saturn, we will be needing to also think about what needs to be cut back, what needs to be reduced, what needs to be lessened. And so there might be elements of your life that you're realizing need to be changed. And because we are also in this much larger story of the Saturn and Neptune cycle coming to an end, and the moon is also more widely applying towards Neptune also, there might be old dreams and old beliefs that are starting to dissolve for you and these new ideas starting to develop of what you really want to build and create in this year ahead. And so I really love the sextile aspect for not only helping us think about the growth that can come in this next year, but also for thinking about, what do we need to trim? What do we need to cut back on? What do we need to shed? Now, the other big aspect going on here with the Capricorn new moon is a square aspect between the lunation with Chiron in Aries. Now, this aspect is not as harmonious and will feel more catalytic and possibly even jolting. But there is a real powerful lesson within this square aspect between a new moon with Chiron to really take in. Now, I like the square aspect between the new moon with Chiron because Chiron has a much more intensified presence right now than normal. This is because Chiron's stationed direct on December 29th, the day before the new moon. And so there might be some issues related to Chiron that are coming up for you at this lunation. And that's going to actually be really helpful as part of you more fully embracing the change and the full potential of the new creative direction that could be emerging for you this next year. As I mentioned before, when we're at these times of transition and threshold, there can be a lot of uncertainty and there can be a lot of fear. And sometimes we can hold ourselves back from fully committing to this exciting new direction. And so, if there are some inner patterns of wounding, this could be related to past relationships, going back to our childhood, even. And because we're talking about Chiron, this can even be something going back further, deeper into time related to our ancestors. But whatever it might be, if you're noticing new information or new revelations coming up with some certain story or pattern that you just keep playing out and feeling like you've been trapped in this loop of it just repeating itself and it's been frustrating in some way because it always seems to get in the way of you fully manifesting or creating what you want, pay attention to that information because by bringing awareness to it, it's going to help you break the pattern. And this astrology coming this next year, it is very volatile. But what's great about that is it's a real type of pattern breaking astrology. And so, this aspect between the new moon with Chiron could be bringing your awareness to important patterns that you can be breaking yourself free from and realizing the ways in which you no longer have to keep repeating that same story. And so, the new moon can be helpful for coming into relationship with what is that new story that you want to write and play out in your life with this new year coming. This feeling of being able to break the pattern and breaking free not only from this past year of 2024 and embracing the change that can come with the year 2025 can even more fully be felt the next day after the new moon on December 31st, when the Capricorn moon will move into a flowing trine aspect with Uranus in Taurus. This trine is very powerful because it'll be occurring at the same time that the moon is becoming visible with the first crescent light of its entire cycle coming. And so this will really add in this quality of wanting to break free and do something more innovative and embrace the potential of the changes that can be coming this year. Now, what you might also notice on this chart, though, is the opposition forming between Mars retrograde in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. It's actually the most powerful, dramatic, extreme underlying influence involved in this Capricorn new moon. And so it's something we need to talk more about. Of course, the building opposition between Mars retrograde with Pluto during the Capricorn new moon is fascinating, considering that Capricorn is the exaltation of Mars. This is because that rugged zodiacal terrain of Capricorn exalts that courageous willpower and force of Mars that can help us in gathering the courage we need to face our fears and times of uncertainty and gather the strength with tenacity and perseverant resilience to work through whatever we have to work through, to fight for our beliefs and values and what we want to create with our life. These are all the kinds of qualities that we're really going to need to embody more and more of in the year ahead. And so, this building, intensifying opposition between Mars retrograde and Pluto are going to be bringing these issues up for us. They might be showing up in our personal relationships, they might be showing up in our work relationships, they might be inner patterns of wounding that we're having to confront. In some ways, they might feel disempowering. They might be exposing some power imbalances. But this is all ultimately giving you information on how to more fully empower yourself in the year ahead. And keep in mind that this is only the second of three oppositions between Mars retrograde and Pluto that will be happening. There was one earlier this year in November when Mars was direct and formed an opposition with Pluto while Mars was at the end of Cancer and Pluto was at the end of Capricorn. Now we're getting the second of the three oppositions that happens with Mars retrograde in Leo and Pluto direct in Aquarius. There will be one more happening at the end of April after we have fully completed the whole Mars retrograde phase and Mars has moved back through Cancer to come back into Leo. And so there's something about this story that is going to be continuing to play out in the months ahead. And so this is only one stage in this much larger story. So keep that in mind if there are some frustrating things going on right now. And again, try to use whatever is coming up for you right now to help you strategize the changes you need to make and how you can more fully empower yourself to embrace the changes coming. So, whatever the lesson you need to take in about this current phase of the Mars Pluto storyline will become very apparent as soon as we turn the calendar from 2024 into 2025. And that's because on the first day of the new year, on January 1st, that waxing moon will enter Aquarius, form a conjunction with Pluto, and then move through an opposition with Mars retrograde. And this is at the same time that this opposition is becoming so close to exact and will, in fact, happen on either January 2nd or January 3rd, depending upon your time zone. So it's going to be this whole first week that we'll be getting a lot of information about this Mars Pluto opposition, but it might be especially the case that on January 1st, January 2nd, and January 3rd, there are some particularly powerful experiences or revelations that come up for you that are going to give you some really crucial information about what this means for you. Now, this opposition between Mars and Pluto getting closer and closer will create a real turning point in the week when they form the exact opposition. This will occur either on January 2nd or January 3rd, depending upon your time zone. But what's fascinating is this turning point that happens on January 2nd or January 3rd is not only significant due to Mars and Pluto, it also has two other big things happening at the same time. One is the entrance of Venus into her exaltation of Pisces, and the other is the movement of Mercury in Sagittarius, moving past the degree where Mercury stationed retrograde at the end of November on November 25th. This zone of the degree range where Mercury moves back and forth while retrograde is commonly called the retrograde shadow zone in astrology. And although the Mercury retrograde period's already been over and Mercury's moving direct now and picking up speed, Mercury moving out of this degree range is just going to be one more added component that will make that movement of Venus into Pisces and that opposition between Mars and Pluto becoming exact even more propulsive, with this sense of a change and generative forward movement emerging at the very outset and beginning of this new year. Now, I have this chart set for the exact opposition between Mars retrograde in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. This will be on January 3rd at about 2:20 a.m. in the morning in the Eastern time zone, which means if you're in the Pacific time zone, this will actually be at the end of the day on January 2nd. But what you can see on this chart is that Venus has already entered Pisces. And this means that Venus will enter Pisces on January 2nd before that opposition between Mars retrograde and Pluto becomes exact. This entrance of Venus into Pisces is very important. Partially, that's because Pisces is the exaltation of Venus, where Venus is enthroned and her status is elevated and raised, and we can get this optimal expression of Venus, which can be really helpful for mending any disruptions we've had in relationships, as well as helping us get a better sense of these new creative directions and inspirations we might be having as we enter this new year. But it's also important because Venus will be spending an unusually long amount of time in Pisces during 2025. In fact, from now all the way through the end of April, Venus will be spending most of the time in Pisces. This first phase, she will spend about a month. So she'll be in Pisces from now all the way until February 3rd. And then later she will enter Aries and then station retrograde in Aries at the beginning of March. And that means she will end up moving backwards into Pisces, and we will get another month of Venus being in Pisces from March 27th until April 30th. This means that there is a big Venus in Pisces storyline coming this year, and it's going to end up being shaken up and volatilized and take us through some sort of dark night of the soul and transmutation and deep change when she later goes retrograde in March and April. But although we don't know fully what all that is going to involve, it's important to realize that whatever is going on now might be continuing to play out in the months ahead. And so paying attention to some of the stories and changes that start happening with this entrance of Venus into Pisces will be more important than normal, because there is a big Venus and Pisces story coming this year. And so what's fascinating about this entrance of Venus into Pisces on January 2nd is that we will get extra information about this shift on January 3rd. When this happens will be depending upon your location, but in the Eastern time zone, this is happening at about 11:20 in the morning on January 3rd. So it's about 8:20, 8:30 in the morning in the Pacific time. But when the moon, this waxing crescent moon, enters Pisces, the moon will immediately form a conjunction with Venus on the day of Venus, on Friday, January 3rd. So this can be a great day for tuning into whatever new sense of creative direction is already starting to emerge for you. This can be a great day just relationally to be connecting with people, and also just really taking some time to get in your own space and really do some productive work, especially if you have anything really creative or artistic that you'd like to be working on. This is a beautiful day to be doing that, as well as just spending the day making space and time for some pleasure and joy and beauty for yourself on this Friday. And then on the next day, January 4th, the moon in Pisces will move away from Venus into a conjunction with Saturn, which is interestingly happening on a Saturday, the day of Saturn. This also means that the moon in Pisces is forming a square aspect with Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. And so we are being reconnected here to that waxing square aspect between Jupiter and Saturn, which is such a pivotal underlying factor in all of the astrology happening right now, and this new growth and change happening in the world during 2025. We had that exact square between Saturn and Pisces and Jupiter and Gemini on December 24th. And so whatever might be going on for you related to that, there's going to be some more information coming here. And this is just yet another really powerful factor in how this new lunar cycle is not only connecting us to this new year, but also these much larger astrological cycles. And so we're going to be getting even more information here about the changes we're really putting into effect during the start of this new year. Now, of course, since this is a conjunction between the moon and Saturn, there might be some uncomfortable things that come up, but it's a great time for really getting in and doing some work. And so, if you have any kind of work to do that you've been putting off, this is a great day to really go in and take care of it. I really like the square from Jupiter to the moon is going to help bring some buoyancy and lift to the downsides of the moon Saturn combination. And then the following day on Sunday, January 5th, the moon in Pisces will be moving away from Saturn into a conjunction with Neptune while also forming a square aspect with Mercury in Sagittarius. And this is really highlighting the fact that Mercury in Sagittarius has now moved away from that Jupiter Saturn square into this square aspect with Neptune. And of course, this also means that the Saturn Neptune cycle, which is coming to an end and is going to be such a big factor in the year ahead and all the great change coming, is really being activated here because the moon is now moving into Neptune at the same time that Mercury is moving into Neptune, with both Mercury and the moon moving away from Saturn. So this is another time where you might get some important ideas about much larger visions of change that you want to be creating in the year ahead. Really pay attention to that if you get some much bigger ideas, they could in some ways be sort of even inflated ideas that are almost too big, but that's not a problem if you dial it back and then discern, what do you really have available time and space for? How can you construct some smaller goals to work towards these bigger changes? This could also just be a good day to do something fun, some fantasy, or just escape from whatever difficult circumstances or hard work you've been having to do recently. That Moon Mercury Neptune combination can really be great for just having some fun. And then later in the day on Sunday, January 5th, we will have a notable shift of energy when the moon leaves Pisces and moves away from that conjunction with Neptune into that fiery sign of Aries, where the moon will pretty much immediately form a very flowing, volcanic, fiery trine aspect with Mars retrograde in Leo. This also means the moon is forming a sextile with Pluto in Aquarius, and so it is mediating that tension of the opposition. And the moon is also forming a conjunction with its own north node in Aries. This is extremely powerful and potent, and is another reason why I'm saying this new moon and new lunar cycle coming in is so generative and so powerful for really facing what you want to be creating this year and really generating some powerful forward momentum here. So this, again, can be a very productive, powerful day, but it also might be a time that you just want to get out and do something really invigorating and active in your community. Just get out and do something fun. It would also be a really great day for that. But I really love this aspect for hopefully, when we have these big tensions, we can feel like we're just kind of being pulled back and forth between two different sides. And there is, of course, that idea of the third, the tension of the opposites, creating this third transcendent idea or solution that ultimately emerges that helps bring a resolution to whatever that tension is. And so this movement of the moon through Aries might really be helpful for getting a better sense of what could be the higher meaning and lesson and ways that you can use this tension of Mars and Pluto to really be more generative and directed in a more empowering way for yourself. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about Monday, January 6th, just because there are two really important things that happen on this day. One is that this square aspect between Mercury and Neptune that I was just talking about becomes exact. And so there could be important events and information for you coming about related to that on this day. Again, it might be really helpful in terms of getting a bigger vision of what you want to be creating this year. And if so, think about ways that you can dial that back to build towards that with smaller steps and goals. There might also be information coming in here about that Saturn Neptune cycle and dissolution and dissolving of old beliefs and old stories that you're realizing are part of this much deeper change that's going on for you. Now, simultaneously, what's happening on this day is Mars is moving backwards from Leo into Cancer, which means this Mars retrograde movement into Cancer will also start applying towards a flowing trine aspect with Neptune and Pisces. So there's something important about this Neptune part of the story that gets more important here on Monday. Now, the movement of Mars into Cancer is very significant because, from a whole sign perspective, there's going to be a whole new section of your chart and life topics that get activated. There is a video that I already made about Mars retrograde that you can watch on my channel if you haven't already, or I recommend just going back and watching it again, especially the part where I talk about the meaning of that shift for you and your sign. But also just keep in mind that Mars moving back into Cancer means it's moving not only into a watery sign, which will make things more emotional and really take us into more of this inner emotional type of change and shifting. It also is the fall of Mars. And because fall of Mars means that we can have some difficulty with our expressions of anger and frustration here, just bring extra mindfulness of that. If you're feeling frustrated and anger, find ways to find more healthy and productive outlets for that. We are coming into a very extreme phase of the Mars retrograde period here. And the full moon in Cancer that comes a week after this will be occurring right at the dead center of the Mars retrograde phase when Mars is most extreme. And so we're building in this lunar cycle towards an illumination of this Mars retrograde story for us. And so at the outset of Mars entering Cancer, you might just be getting some initial ideas and senses of what this deeper change is going to be happening for you with this Mars retrograde in Cancer. Keep in mind, Mars will be retrograde in Cancer for the rest of January and for most of February. So again, it's just the very initial beginning of whatever this story is going to be for you. If you'd like to have a consultation talking about the astrology of 2025 and how that will impact you, my books are open for January, and you can find information about booking a consultation with me below. You can also find information there about my Patreon community. Please take a look at the benefits you will receive as a Patreon and the different tiers. There is extra educational information I offer there, as well as monthly meetings and a learning community that you can access there. Otherwise, please like and subscribe to my channel. And thank you for watching this video. I wish you the best with the exciting astrology coming in 2025.